for the first live on the YouTube channel. Um, Glad to see everybody here. So today, what I'm going to be working on is, well, I've been getting into quilting some bags before I actually make them, which are a lot of the by Annie patterns. This is the most recent one I did. If you can see, this is all quilted. And I realized not everybody knows how to do quilting. So I thought I'd cover that today. I am starting a new bag. This is the new bag I'm starting. It's the On the Go 2.0 by the By Annie. You can go to byannie.com to buy the pattern. So the fabrics I'm using, this is my exterior fabric. This is my lining fabric. And this is from the Tula Pink line. Glad to see you, Melody. This is from the Tula Pink line Untamed. This is her most recent line that came out in, I believe, November. So as you can see, there's foam in between. And I'm going to show you two different ways of making it. So as you can see, they're pretty much stuck together. This is actually using basting spray. The bigger piece I have partially because I wanted to show you another way to do it, and partially because it's good to know another way. If you can see from the front side, I have pins that go through both layers. This does not have basting spray. And as you see, I don't pin every inch. I pin in between the lines I've drawn for the quilting. So yes, I know I could have done my quilting on the lines of this one, but if you see, I have drawn lines, and these are my quilting lines. And I have drawn them on there. You can use chalk. In this case, I used the erasable marking pens that erase with a iron. When I did this bag, and just if anybody's curious, this is the Everything, A Place for Everything 2.0. And this uses, I did a 3/4 inch quilting. And so what I do, let's see, let me hook it up to the Wi-Fi. Sometimes that does it. Let's see if that'll, it also might be me shaking. So when I do quilting, depending on how much, you can do quilting that's very simple. Like I did these. These are just a 3/4 inch going from the diagonal. They're not straight up and down. And I only did one direction because I did a very small quilting. Gotta love all that winter weather messing with signals. So, all right. So, as you can see, this only did one direction, but to me, because it was a smaller thing, I did not need to go the other direction. You could go the other direction as well. So, in this case, this is a small sling bag. Let's see, I don't know if it tells me. It is 8 inches high by 6 inches wide by 2 inches deep. So this one, I thought, and if you look right here, this is part of the line of Tula Pink that's actually coming out in April, which are bees, which I think are really pretty. But so just to show you on the smaller side, you can see where I have drawn my lines as well. Now for quilting, the biggest thing is to mark all your lines very accurately. And then you're going to start at one corner. And the way I do it, and I will show it when I go on the machine, is I go and stitch, and I don't ever take my needle out unless I run out of thread. I will actually take and stitch. And as you can see, because it's just basting spray, it's not a permanent base, but it's holding it in place. So I will go and then I will go down to the next line and stitch across and then down and do that all the way across the fabric. So I'm going to show you with the little one and then we'll do the big one. And that's all I'm going to do today, but I just wanted to make sure you can see how to actually quilt for bags. These are bigger than what um, the pieces you need. The pieces that you cut for this are a lot smaller than these pieces. This particular one is the zipper panel, and I believe the sides, whereas the big one's the main body. And you are actually going to cut like 5 pieces out of the larger size. Um, but when you quilt, things shrink, so you always cut something bigger. There. All right, so we're going to switch it to the sewing machine. And just in case, so you can see this before I actually get you in there really good, here is the thread I'm using. Now, the pattern calls for 50 weight quilting thread. And I will say I like how quilting thread does. However, so you need a heavier weight thread versus a lighter weight, like what most Gutermann is, or Coats and Clarks. Because if I actually were to show you, let's see if I've got my spool of. All right, so this is 50 weight Coats and Clark, and it's pretty thick. Whereas if I were to grab regular gauge, just regular Gutermann, even seeing them together, you can see that this one is thicker and it's 100% cotton, which makes it easier for quilting. It's a lot stronger than even your Gutermann. What I'm using is from Wizardry Stitchery, and it is 45 weight. So it's almost the same strength as quilting thread, and I don't ever have a problem with it snapping. So that's why, and that's actually what I used on the previous bag quilting, so I know it'll work. So I'm gonna move you to the machine and we're gonna start our quilting for today. All right. So as you can see, I have my lines that I'm going to follow. And now when you do quilting, you want to make sure you're at about a 3 on your machine because you want a slightly bigger stitch. You don't want it super tiny or anything like that, but you don't want it super small, super large either. So I usually do a 3 for quilting. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is, as I said, I am going from one line that I've drawn on here to the other. And as you see, stuff it under the machine. And this is where having, especially on the bigger pieces, having the pins versus the basting spray, as you probably saw when I put it under there, the material came up. But I'm just going to the edge and moving it to the next line and stitching. Now, like I said, I've done this with both chalk markers. I've also done with the erasable pens. If you're using like a darker material, chalk pens work great. However, this is light material, so I'm using a darker iron dome, or should I say heat removable marking pen. But in case I didn't mention, the one that is this side, this is my lining side. The main reason I marked on this side versus the other side, so that if all my markings do not come off, they're on the inside of the bag. That's another thing I do to account for that. Now, you can I've never tried one of the by Annie patterns with vinyl, but I have quilted vinyl as well. And in that case, if you're going to quilt vinyl, definitely cut your piece bigger than you need because, yet again, it will shrink. Some of the Ora Rosa patterns actually give you the option and tell you how to quilt, such as the Catalina bag, which is one of my favorites. And I have quilted a Edgar Allan Poe bag. I did a fancy quilt and then put a raven magnetic snap as a decorative piece. And then the inside was Edgar Allan Poe fabric. So the biggest thing, a lot of people say, "Oh, you need a walking foot." Well, walking foots can be helpful. As you notice, I'm not using a walking foot. You can. And the reason I have a walking foot, I don't know that I've actually ever used it. Probably should, but I am going at a consistent speed. I'm not pulling my fabric or pushing my fabric. I'm just moving it as the feed dogs pull it through. And I try to keep it a consistent speed as I sew so that it will look good and be a consistent length. Now, if you're worried about the fact that I'm stitching on the sides, it's not an issue because I'm stitching at an eighth of an inch from the edge, which is automatically going to be in any of the by Annie, your seam allowance for the most part is quarter inch. Occasionally you put a 3/8 of an inch in there, but in the couple I've done, mostly it's an eighth of an inch. Plus, you're quilting the larger piece. Um, and then you're cutting your pieces. Now, I've done basic stuff for Gutermann as well, but this is coming from my mother who's done a lot of quilting. That over time, 100% cotton thread lasts longer in washing and things like that. It's not on how it actually quilts at the time. It's longevity of the quilting, if that makes sense. So it's not that it's inferior for actually doing the actual quilting, it's the longevity of a quilt does better with quilting thread, if that makes sense. Well, all I know is that quilting thread is 50 gauge. Most sewing thread is around 30 to 35. What I'm sewing with right now is 45 gauge thread. So just to let you know. And I know for a fact that, like, for my embroidery machine, I use 27 gauge. So it's just different. You just need to know what's best for your machine in that regards. That's about the best I can say. Machine and what kind of thing you want for your quilt. And like I said, this is not quilting a quilt, so it's a little different. So I said, this is what I've been told. I said, just to show you how it's looking on the other side. And that's one reason I picked this. You can see all the colors. This is a variegated thread, and you see all the colors that are represented in the fabric. And that's one reason I did this. I just know that different gauges are heavier. The higher the number, the heavier the gauge. And like I said, I'm sewing with 45, and it's definitely thicker than like Gutermann. And I have the quilting thread that is Coats and Clark, and it's machine quilting thread. Now, machine quilting thread and hand quilting thread is a different weight. Just to let you know, I don't know what the weight for um hand quilting is. I just know basically what machine quilting is. So I'm not much help on that regard. I've only recently started doing any type of quilting, and it's always for a bag. I've done a few wall hangings and um, tree skirts, but I have not done a lot of quilting other than for bags. So it's a little different, but I don't use all kinds of different. Like I said, in my machine a lot, I use Gutermann, but I also use the 45 weight from Wizard Stitchery. Um, most, I can tell you, most industrial machines use, I believe, 70 or something around that. They use a heavier weight. So that's about the only thing. But all I have is a regular sewing machine and a semi-industrial, which is what I'm on right now. So I know what my machines can take. Like I said, I know um, embroidery thread goes from anywhere from 25 up to um, 40, depending on the material. A lot of rayon is 40 weight, but a lot of polyester is 27 or 30 weight. So, like I said, it depends on the materials. It depends what kind of machine you're sewing with. That's about the best I can say for that. No, I've actually been looking at some of the by Annie patterns for a while, and I think even as an experienced seamstress, um, sewing bags as well as clothing, I just have never done a lot of quilting, so they always kind of intimidated me. So I've only done minimal. So now I'm starting to actually like the looks of it. It's more work, but I'm loving, like I said, so you can see, I love how that looks, especially how you have the different colors. Like I said, this is going to be a sling bag, and I will show this once it's completed. The most of the quilting part, when I did the a place for everything bag that I made, it takes about 2 days to get everything cut out and basted and quilted for that bag, and that's not even putting the bag together. At least for me, that is. Okay, so we're almost at the halfway point for the little piece. Like I said, if I'd wanted to do an even smaller quilt, I could have just followed the lines on the fabric. But I've kind of found I like the 3/4 inch quilt, and I don't feel obligated to go the other direction for that. And it still looks very complete. Sometimes I think it's a little much for trying to, because the first one I did, I actually drew off a 3/4 inch quilt going both directions so it would make pretty diamonds. And I didn't like how it looked. Well, I sewed one direction all the way around. And by the time I was finished with that, I had my chalk markings going the other direction. I went, that's just going to be too busy. Oh, that's probably true. This machine, this is a quilting machine. So that does have, like I said, it comes with actually a free motion quilt foot. It comes with a walking foot. I'm just kind of, I use the piping foot to put on piping. I use the zipper foot sometimes, actually, a lot of times I will actually just use my narrow foot, which I keep on most of the time. But like if I were to show you my most common feet, yes, all my extra bobbins. This is my piping foot for the Juki. So if you see, it actually will sew right next to that piping. And I use the invisible zipper foot. This is an TL18 QVP. It's a Haruka. But as far as, and then I have for very sticky vinyls, I have a Teflon foot. And these are all feet. Now, all of these did not come, the piping foot, the invisible zipper foot, and see that's my normal size foot. Did not come with this machine. I actually ordered them extra because they are ones I use all the time. So, but yes, this one thing with this machine is that it has an extra deep throat. So it is I believe it's like twice as wide as like my other machine. So when I have to do like buttonholes and things on, because since this is only a straight stitch machine, it doesn't do buttonholes and things like that. Um, it has brain lost my train of thought. So when you have this, it does a straight stitch and it has lots of different feet it comes with. It has a You have to order a heavy duty bobbin plate if you're going to be sewing with a lot of vinyl. Otherwise, you'll get or you'll break a lot of needles. So it doesn't come with everything you need as a bag maker, but it is perfect if you're going to do both a combination of sewing garments, quilting, and bag making. I find it's an awesome bag, awesome machine, should I say. And I have been able to tackle most materials without issue. But as I said, this is a lot smaller bag than the previous bag that I did. And if you notice, I am just reverse stitching to the next line instead of twisting it all the way through. That's another way you can do that. Probably not what people would suggest, but that's what I do so I don't have to have as much through the throat of the machine. Yeah, I love my Juki. I've had this almost 5 years now. Never had an issue. I do make sure it gets yearly maintenance because I put it through its paces. See, and we are on to our final corner over here. So I'm going to go down. And I hope everybody else has been staying warm. We actually got about 3 inches of snow yesterday, first snow in about 3 years. So that the kids enjoyed that. So you're really not going to be able, because of the pattern on the lining fabric, you're not really going to be able to see the quilting so much. As you can see, you can't really see, other than the little indentations. You can't really see um, the quilting. But like I said, on the other side, it does have a checkered print in the background behind the florals. But I do the quilting in a either very contrasting thread if I want it to stand out. And in this case, because I love showcasing how awesome Tula Pinks looks with variegated, and this one particularly is for me. I am using a variegated pastel to quilt this. Plus, I know the weight of this thread, so I feel very comfortable with how it will hold up long term. This, like I said, first snow since we've had since 2022, which means it's been nice and cold trying to sell Girl Scout cookies. So, all the fun stuff. One last line, itty bitty line at the very end. Okay. Okay. Just to show. So here is our quilted pieces. So if you can see the variegation, how it goes from blue to matches the colors in the fabric almost perfectly, which is why I like doing that. I like having the pop of color in the quilting. If I wanted it to blend, I would probably do a white. So, and I love how a freshly quilted piece feels. You can almost hear it kind of go. So that one is complete. And to get rid of the lines, which it's hard to see after the stitching, I will just take a iron and press away. And this, like I said, this is the heat sensitive marking pins, and they do disappear with heat. However, if the reason you don't mark on the front, that sometimes when they get too cold, those markings will come back up. So always do it from a side you're not going to see on a regular basis. That's my 2 cents as far as where you mark on the lining side. So as you can see, you might see my little yellow dots. Those are my pins. And as you can see, here's my lines. Yet again, I pinned in between the lines, and I will take them out as I go. And there is no basting spray in this. So I will start from the corner and we'll just go. And we're just gonna, and so any questions you have about what I'm doing, feel free to ask. I do hope to have some new patterns for you soon. I am prepping for one of my biggest markets. So I doubt I get more pattern writing done before March, unless before the end of February, unless things, plus with Girl Scout cookies, it's kind of hard to get a lot of writing done because most of my extra time, and as you can see, a lot bigger fabric, and so having those pins as you're maneuvering your big piece through is very helpful. And so I will pull pins out as I go, so I'm not having to do it all at the end. And thank you, Melody. So I will, as you can see, we get into where it's very thick. And so actually, as you see with the fabric going in the middle of the camera, I will actually start sewing in between. And after I sew past the pin, I will pull it out. Like I said, this is an alternative. The biggest thing when you're doing this is to make sure to pin. Most things say every 6 to 8 inches. I do it about every two, just because I don't want to have it shift. And so it takes me a little longer to pin it. But as you can see, everything's nice and straight here. No big bubbles or anything like that. And so I'll just pull out pins as I go past them, at least on this side that I've already quilted. Like I said, I wanted to partially show you that you can do it without basting spray. It's a little more difficult. I actually prefer basting spray, especially if you have, and if anybody wants to know what I use 505 spray, which is a temporary basting spray, or I don't remember what it's called, but Dritz actually puts out a temporary adhesive that if you were to look in like Joann's, it's in like their ironing stuff. And it works just as well, if not a little bit better than 505, but it's a little more expensive. So that's the biggest thing is that you go little by little. Don't try to rush it, especially when you're quilting. I found that rushing it just gets it to look like it's kind of jumbled because you're making your stitches too tight or too big. So, and like I said, you can always check. And if you think your bobbin might be running out, a good place to stop is at the edges where you can start and stop. And as you say, I go good and slow, just follow my little line. And I said, I've used chalk and I've used marking pens. Chalk comes off, in some ways, it comes off easier, sometimes it's harder. And if you're wondering why I'm lifting up there, it's because I'm trying to say, did I hit the next line? So I'm making sure before I keep moving and twist all around. So we just go little by little, take our time, pull out our pins as we go by. Hopefully, everybody is staying safe in this cold, or if you are in the western part of the country, you're staying safe from the fires. And the other thing, getting stuck with pins. That's when, in this case, quilting safety pins are better for the sheer reason that you don't have things sticking you as you sew, getting caught on your sleeves or thereabouts. So right now, so just kind of going through as far as quilting. The other things I've found is um, you could easily do these bags by buying pre-quilted fabric and not have to actually quilt your own. There is lots of pretty pre-quilted fabrics. Problem is when you get interested in fabrics like Tula Pink, which don't come pre-quilted, so you have to quilt your own. Yeah, some of the people I'm friends with live in San Diego, and they're starting to pick up there, so they just got evacuated. A little scary. And this is how you have pins stuck to each other right there. So, as you say, the biggest thing with quilting is just take your time. It takes time. My goal for us to be done tonight is to be done with the quilting. So, if there are any questions about any upcoming patterns, who knows? I have two tote bags coming up. I also have a carry-on bag for travel that I plan on releasing sometime this year. And once I get it written up, the tote bags are basically written up. I just have to actually sit down and write it. I just heard in some neighborhoods near San Diego that it was starting to have some there. Go ahead. But pulling out pins yet again. I'm actually going to go ahead and turn this. Joys of turning and it getting caught. Actually going to, so I don't have to kind of manhandle it again. Just as I said before, I'm going to reverse stitch to go back to my next line. And I will probably check my bobbin at the end of this line because I did not have a quite full bobbin when I started quilting the other one. And I said, if you're gonna start and stop, do it on the edge. So it's not gonna show on your um front of your bag. So I'm actually, as I do my turn where I would stitch to the next line, I'm gonna actually stop and check my bobbin. And I'm still pretty good right now. I have a good about a third of a bobbin. So I'm actually, so as you can see, I think I'm gonna go ahead and switch bobbins, mainly so that I don't run out during the rest of my quilting. And since I'm going to be making this bag, I am going to be using all that thread anyways, and it's better in the construction versus the quilting. That's one of my tips. If you think you're about to run out, go ahead and switch bobbins. See, I'm going to go ahead and start where the other one left off. Pull out pins. Uh, I will be working on this bag for the next couple weeks just to show you some different ways of doing binding and everything else for this bag. Because they do binding, the on the go, or should I say, the by Annie patterns do binding it differently, which is similar to more how you do an actual quilt versus a regular bag or even like my Cool Cube or anything like that. But at least at this point, I know that I am not going to run out of my bobbin. So before I finish this. And if anybody's curious about the foot I'm using the narrow foot for the Juki. So when you see me going to the edge of the fabric, that is an eighth of an inch from the edge. When I put the edge of that foot, it's an eighth of an inch seam. So I will do that a lot of the time to do my basting. So that's why, and like when I do basting for zippers, I do an eighth of an inch to hold it in place. So I just find that in a lot of ways, I have my machine keep the narrow foot on a majority of the time. Going to cut excess thread away here. And as I said, this is not the size of the bag I'm doing, but you actually cut it down. She has it where you do the binding where you fold it in half, wrong sides together, and then stitch it down and then fold it over the seam to the front. So it's very much like doing quilt binding, or at least how I've been taught to do quilt binding. But I kind of do a mix of how I do binding and how she does binding, at least how you join it at the end of the binding. I do it a little different, but I do it the way I feel good with, and I'll show you what I mean with the other bag in just a minute, at least to get through this part I'm going through right now. Okay. Removing pins so they're not in my way of turning. Okay. Just to show you. So this is a place for everything. And as you can see, this is all binding. And here is where I joined it. And what's great is you can't completely tell where they finished. I'll go over that as we do this bag. Like I said, I did something a little different, not something that's out there that everybody's seen. So I figured everybody could see something new, which is a little different. Not to say there's not plenty of awesome patterns that do PDF design, but I've gotten, like I said, when I'm starting to make stuff for myself now, I kind of like the by Annie. And um, if I'm not making something brand new for a design for me to make, which I have some of those in the works too. Don't think I don't. And I kind of mix and match techniques a lot of times, um, whether it's mine or a mishmash between two or three different designers, or even quilting techniques or techniques I've learned while sewing clothing. There's all kinds of different things you can learn. It's always fun to learn new stuff and experiment with new stuff. Okay, we're almost to the halfway point. So just to show you what it looks like on the other side, and if you see, there's no big weird lumps or anything like that. So the pin, I've kept it very uniform. There's no big bubbles or anything like that, which is all we're hoping for. And I'm hoping there's not, considering how many times I pinned and unpinned things because I wasn't happy with it. So I was trying to make sure all that was good. So I'm happy it's turning out as good as it is. I said, still, I know how to quilt. It's just I've not done tons of it with bags yet. I've done, like I said, I've done wall hanging, I've done table runners, but I've never done much for bags. So it's a little different, but the same. And my next one, I'm going to try to do maybe a fancier um, quilting. You can do zigzags, you can do diamonds, you can do curves, you can do free-handed quilting. I'm not there yet. I like I'm very mathematically oriented, so I like straight lines. That's probably the best way to put it. I like things to make sense in proportions, which is why when I do another way you can do for marking versus the chalk or heat erasable marking pens is that you can actually take painter's tape, mark off your center line, and then take it whatever width painter's tape on either side. And I've done this as well. And I've done this for a small bedspread for a toddler. So you're talking about 2-inch wide quilting. So I had to use something that was that width. And you will put it, you stitch your line that you mark wherever your center is going to be. And then you will place your painter's tape and paint right up to it. And then you will stitch on the other side of the painter's tape. And you just move the painter's tape one set of stitches over at a time. It's a little more time consuming sometimes, but it does actually work very well. Go a little bit at a time. And what's great about when you get it quilted, it rolls up so easily. Makes it a lot easier to turn. So just take our time and we get it quilted. And I will zoom back out to show everything we've done. And after this bag is done, I may revisit doing a cool cube from beginning, not just transferring it over from the Facebook group. I may just do a fresh cool cube from start to finish in a couple weeks' time, and we can do that together. And I can go over again how to do that. Makes things a little more interesting. I have the same thread in the bobbin and that. I know with when I've done quilting, I usually use the same weight, and that's why it's not a big deal for me. Um, I know some people will use, and that's why they will quilt from the exterior fabric up top. So they use a lighter weight in the bobbin. However, the Juki will handle 45 or 50. And I know that because I've quilted the previous bag with 45, and I use 45 all the time. And I quilted a place for everything for my mother using 50 weight in both the bobbin and the top stitching. And so when you have the same weight, I find I don't have an issue, but I know some people will use a lighter weight in the bobbin and a heavier weight on the top. But in that case, you have to actually top stitch it from the exterior up so that your heavier thread is on the top. That's what my understanding is. Okay, we are officially over that halfway point. So, yay. I'm going to move that over. But since these are both the same weight, it doesn't really matter which side I do the quilting from. Like I said, if I'm gonna have markings show, I'd rather them um I've never messed with the tension in my bobbin. I've messed with the tension in my threads, but if you're using a heavier weight, you have to have a little more. I think my tension or is at 2, and I keep it there for the most part for my thread tension. So, I've never messed with my bobbin tension. I've been told, "Don't mess with your bobbin tension if at all possible, because that can mess up how it will pick up the thread." And that was from my dealer that I got the Juki from. They said, "You really shouldn't have to change the tension in the bobbin." But like I said, I usually use the same weight on top as I do on bottom. So that may be my why I've never had to. I know you can adjust the bobbin tension, but then you can have more issues. About the only thing I can say on that. You say we're going around that corner, so had to kind of stitch corner. I can understand why adjusting the tension can make people a little scared. I haven't messed with my thread tension, the one right here, but I don't mess with the bobbin. Basically, if I start getting a lot of thread that's snapping, um, usually being lighter weight threads, I will lessen the tension. Um, I've never used really heavier than 45 or 50 in this machine. So I think you can actually use 60 in this machine, but I've never tried myself. Instead, I kind of stick to what I know works. Plus, I have all these pretty threads from Wizard Stitchery. They have some really awesome variegated. I have a one that they call Phoenix Fire, one that's unicorn mane. The only difference between those is that the unicorn mane has a pink in it, and the Phoenix Fire has a red versus a pink. Otherwise, the colors are the exact same. So, I actually have both. I'm almost out of unicorn mane, and I probably will not order it again until I get out of the Phoenix Fire because I think they're kind of interchangeable. Now, this one's called specifically is called Fairy Floss, and it's a pastel rainbow. So it's a lot lighter, and it's more pinks and purples and teals, um, versus the bright reds, green, and yellow, but it's more of a pastel yellow versus a bright yellow. So that makes the difference. Mm. That pin wasn't exactly in the center, which is why it got taken out before I got to it. But since I have sewn on this side and pinned on this side, it should not be an issue. Excuse me. Joys of having a hoodie, your pins get stuck on your the ties of your hoodie. But hey, we're most of the way there. We're over halfway now. Apparently missed a pin in the last line. Happens. But so like I said, since I'm pulling out pins as I go, I don't have to do that all at the end, which you could, but I just find it's easier to pull out pins as I go so that I don't have to worry about it later. Because once it's stitched down, it's not going to move on that side. Well, we're almost there. Any other questions so far about this or type of machine I use? Like I said, I like this one because it has the benefits of being a quilting machine, a semi-industrial, as well as a lots of different options. He said it is straight stitch, so I can sew a zipper, can't sew a buttonhole, can't do a zigzag stitch. So I have my basic little singer for that. But which is why I have not moved to an industrial versus this one because I can't do any of those on most industrials either. There are a few exceptions, but they are out of my price range at the moment. But yet again, they are Jukies. Beforehand, I always sewed on brothers or singers before I got my Juki. I don't know that I will ever go back to just a brother or a singer after getting my Juki. I really love how durable and strong it is. So, oh, I love the open throat, especially when you have like big bags, like duffel bags and things like that. You're trying to shove it through there. It makes things interesting when I think about the fact I used to shove that on a domestic and it was a lot harder. And I burned through the motor of two domestic machines before I realized, oh, you need something a little more heavy duty. So that's the reason I went to a semi industrial after I killed my second domestic machine. I have a Singer Serger and I use it a good bit. I'd love to have a cover stitch, but that's not as important for me. I more do stuff on the Serger for my family than for business. So I can't really uh, say that's an expense I should put in for just having it for myself. Even though I'd like it, it'd be a nice addition. But no, I think I burned out my last domestic machine, the motor, actually sewing bowl cozies of all things. I was sewing through them and I went, "Oh boy." Now I have nothing. I love brothers. I actually have a brother 6 needle embroidery machine. Um, I have my Singer domestic. I have my daughter has a Baby Lot domestic, which is still a little heavier duty than my Singer one, but it's less complex because it doesn't have any computer parts. Whereas the Singer I have has like 70 or 80 stitches because it has a computer. So I like this one because it's pretty simple. It only has the one type of stitching. And I will say with the 18 QVP, it's heavy. It's about 40 pounds if you've not had one before. It's not a lightweight machine. It is completely metal, minus the little table here that lifts up, but the actual machine is metal. As you can see, we're down to the very last bit. Well, I recently had to get a new brother 6 needle. I have a brother single needle. Um, Previously I had a Baby Lock 6 needle that was 20 years old, and it finally just said, "I'm 20 years old. I need to be put out to pasture," basically. So I'm going to cost more to fix than I'm worth. And so I got a new um, 6 needle brother this summer. Random thread that came off the edge of the selvage. So we have we're almost done. Have about 5 more rows, and this whole piece will be quilted. Now, the thing is, when you quilt these, is that then you will cut down your pieces you need for the bag out of the large panel that we've just quilted. I mean, if you think about it, it's only a 8 by 6 by 2 bag, so this is not a very big bag. So I'm getting my main body out of all of this piece right here. But that's one thing you need to make sure you do. If you're quilting fabric, quilt it before you cut it, and always cut it bigger than you need because it will shrink. Especially with the foam. Now, it's a little different versus quilting with um, batting versus the foam I'm using. Um, this is being being quilted with foam. I know most quilts will use batting, or this is just Pellon 71F. I believe that's it. No, 77F. Sorry, 77F foam. Now the pattern calls for Annie's soft and stable, and it is a superior foam. I will say that. However, cost wise, I use the Pellon unless I get a really good deal on the by and because soft and stable is actually produced by Annie. And it's a great product. I'm not saying anything that it is an awesome product. However, I go what's cost efficient a lot of the times too. And the Flex foam from Pellon works great. Another one that's used a lot of the time is the Bosal, which is a double-sided fusible foam. And see, that's where you could do that instead of basting spray. You would just press your fabric onto your foam and it stays for you to do the quilting. So I don't know if everybody would have heard of Soft and Stable by Annie or the Bosal, but they are both a more expensive option, but they are both really nice products. So we're down to the last few. Okay. See, I'm just kind of folding it out of the way as best I can. And we're down to our last three passes. Take a couple more pins out. I'm gonna switch. See me manhandle the fabric through, because that's where we're at the very edge. So I have the very last little strip to quilt, and then we are all done. Like I said, this is the size of one of about four pieces for the place for everything, so it's a lot bigger um, bag. But just to show you, here is the completed quilting on the front, if you can see. And as we look, there's no big bubbles, no weird. Now I've got some selvage threads that got stuck in there, but it all stitches pretty good, all flat. Everything lays flat, which is my biggest concern with this. So we're all good. So there is one piece all quilted. Here is the other piece. And so we had two pieces that we had to cut and quilt. So I will cut these pieces down to the actual pieces that are needed, as well as all the coordinating fabric and everything. And we'll continue doing that next week. I have everything already cut out. I showed before what fabrics I was using for the binding and everything, and I will get all that cut out. And I will see y'all again next Wednesday, providing nothing else comes up weather-wise or anything like that. And I will talk to y'all later. Once once I figure out how to cut it off.